Our keynote speaker, I have the great pleasure to introduce. This is Sir Terence English. Sir Terence is originally from South Africa and established the internationally renowned heart transplant programme at Papworth near Cambridge. And he performed Britain's first successful heart transplant in 1979. 10 years later, he became the president of the Royal College of Surgeons and was later described in the BMJ as perhaps the best president of the medical Royal Colleges since the war, which is quite an accolade. And if that wasn't enough, in 1995 he became president of the British Medical Association, and he is currently patron of the Primary Trauma Care Foundation, delivering courses in trauma care in far-flung places, developing countries like Gaza and in Pakistan. Now that is his impressive CV, but that only tells half a story, of course. He's also an adventurer. He enjoys long 4x4 drives to remote parts of the world as well, and it was on one of these trips, while passing Victoria Falls some years ago, that he saw a sign saying bungee jumping, free for the over 70s. Well, he couldn't pass up a free bungee jump, could he? As has been mentioned before, Sir Terence has been a friend and supporter of the chiropractic profession for many years. And it all started 25 years ago when he bumped into Peter Dixon on a chairlift in a ski resort. Now, it's unclear how often Peter had to ride the chairlift before the right person got on. But ultimately, this led to Sir Terence's friendship with our profession and his advice to start a college of chiropractors to emulate the medical Royal Colleges at a time when we were going for our regulation. Now, it's unlikely that the profession would have got the support from the medical profession for a college of chiropractors if it wasn't for Sir Terence. And of course, the College of Chiropractors is now a Royal College. So his friendship has encouraged us to reach higher, to go further, to fulfil our tryst with destiny. If you will, Sir Terence English.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Despite all those nice things you say about me, I feel a bit of a fraud standing here this afternoon because when my good friend Peter Dixon approached me about this society being established and wanting me to come to a meeting that you were having today, and would I come along and give a little chat and so on, and I said, of course, I'd love to. And it was only when I was having a drink outside that somebody brought to my attention that I'm the keynote speaker. Somebody else suggested that perhaps a better title would be the trophy speaker. Anyway, as mentioned, Peter Dixon and I, our friendship started on the Alps, and you were incorrect in saying that I suggested that a college should be formed along the lines of the British Medical College. Peter, actually, as I recall, said that he was keen to get a college started. And as I was just becoming president of the British Medical Association that year and had been president of the College of Surgeons, he, talked about it and sought my ideas and so on. But it was his idea. And it's been fascinating to watch the development of your profession over the last 25 years, and it is exactly 25 years since we met. Because that college was founded, and difficulty to start with, getting the people together, getting them all pointed in the same direction. And then it was really interesting watching the developments that took place in your profession, because I think I'm right in saying that the next thing was the General Chiropractics Council. Is that correct? That was the next event. And that was terribly important at that stage, to have a body which was modelled on the General Medical Council, which would look into issues of discipline by individual members of the profession. And also, very importantly at that time, and why I mention it now, is that it had under its provision to review the education of medical schools. And that was a very important part of the GMC as it was. I was a member of the Education Committee for some years, and we used to review medical schools every 5 years to see that they were up to standard. And we acknowledged medical schools in parts of the Commonwealth like Australia and South Africa and Canada that with graduates of their universities, their medical schools, could come to Britain and automatically be accepted onto the register. So that educational aspect was an important part of the GMC, and I would hope now that this latest engagement is starting that the GCC will have an important role in that way in your profession. But that Peter was, I think, largely responsible for. And then with that in place, the next thing was the Royal College of Chiropractic. And that was entirely appropriate at the time because of these standards which had been laid down pretty early on and achieved. And so it's been very interesting over the last, as I say, 25 years, for somebody like me, a cardiac surgeon and then retired, to see how, I mean, you've been going, as I understand it, since the 1880s or somewhere, but it's only really the last 25 years, it seems, that you've taken off as a profession, certainly in as far as Britain is concerned. So now, the new society, it's entirely appropriate that this is being embarked on in the same way, the same bold decisions that have been made by your leadership in the past that I've described, that you should now get involved with wanting to expand the number of trained chiropractic surgeons around the country and to establish them in universities. A few things there I would think about. One is that it's an ambitious program, and you're starting with two, as I understand it, one on the South Bank and one in Tees. And I think that's wise. You've approached others, but I think to start with two and get the right standard of staff in those courses and universities is all important, because if you decided you're going to start 4 or 5, or if you go too rapidly to expanding, it's going to be difficult. So rather get a couple of really good programs going initially and then feel your way from there as the expansion needs to take place. So the ideal is to have it in a university. And as we heard earlier, I was so impressed that in Zurich, it is the medical school is part of the university in which the chiropractic education now takes place. And I think ideally, this is what you ought to seek, because having your undergraduates training in chiropractic alongside medical students and their staff and so on, I think this would be the best option you could go for. And I think you'll get there if you run a couple of really good programs in South Bank and Tees, and they get recognised as being good, and they get inspected by the GCC, and you have this. You will get universities interested in having you alongside them, because I think that's terribly important. Now, another thought that comes to mind, I mean, collaboration, very, very important. And in this regard, Peter and I discussed the possibility of collaboration with the Royal College of Surgeons, not in an active way of collaborating, but in terms of getting them to know and appreciate what the profession is all about. I was president for 3 years. At the end of that time, I knew nothing about chiropractic, really. I mean, you know, we'd heard it and so on, but really wasn't aware of it. So we've gone along that route. Peter approached the president, and there was a welcoming letter, but needs a bit of prodding there. And I'm sure that Peter is very good at prodding people to do things for the profession. It's also important, I think, another organisation that should be approached and engaged with is the British Orthopedic Association, because they get very involved with orthopedic surgeons who become back surgeons. I mean, one of my friends and colleagues in Cambridge trained as a back surgeon in Texas and then came to Cambridge and did a terrific job in that. So they need to know what your skills are, where your levels are, what you can handle better than them. And BOA is a tough, important association, and I think you've already contacted somebody who's also on the council of the College of Surgeons, and getting the communication before the collaboration is terribly important. And I think the communication needs to be wide. There are, you know, some anaesthetic specialists who run very interesting pain clinics, and they become pain specialists. Now, how much do they know about what you do? And in this respect, I don't know the answer to this, and you probably have got it all done and dusted down already. But besides the medical profession, the general public, the schools, which you're concentrating on at present, they need to know, what does the chiropractic profession do? And some simple leaflets made out at different levels, perhaps 2 or 3, starting with school kids and then maybe, you know, having 2 higher ones, presenting what you do and the evidence taken from the literature. I remember a very interesting article in the BMA, maybe 6, 8, 10 years ago, I can't remember now, but it showed how effective this could be in general practice, in the referral of patients, rather than sending them to a neurosurgeon or an orthopedic surgeon and so on. And that message needs to be delivered with evidence of how successful you are in your particular field. And I'm sure you've got that evidence, but it needs, you know, communicating before you collaborate. So those are thoughts which, I mean, I come here because we met on the ski slope quarter of a century ago, and we both had a great time then and became friends, and I've watched with great interest and admiration as you have grown and what you've achieved to date. And I think this latest objective of trying to expand the number of well-trained chiropractic people in the UK, it's needed. You need to make the case strongly for why it's needed, and then this will be very much part of solving that. And then I'm not sure what you'll do after that, but you'll do something which I'm sure will be good. Thank you.